Okay, thank you. I rise today to ask for your support on this resolution. I'd like to especially thank my colleague, Mr. Koretz, for authoring it, Council President Krikorian for swiftly bringing this to the Council at a time when people need a space to feel safe. And I especially want to thank the many hundreds of people who wrote in to support it, along with those who came downtown today to speak out against it and who've called in. This resolution has the city adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which is the most widely accepted definition around the world because it reflects the many forms of hate that Jewish people experience every day. This definition includes overwhelming support from major Jewish organizations throughout Los Angeles and beyond. 37 member UN countries have adopted this definition. It is not a legally binding definition, but in this time of healing, we ask that our city departments learn and incorporate it into their trainings. It's particularly important now because anti-Semitic incidents are on the rise in California, as many folks have spoken to. We all saw the latest hateful display over the 405, which several speakers talked about. Now, why do we need a definition of anti-Semitism, albeit a definition that's not legally binding in any way? Because anti-Semitism mutates, and it often occurs in ways that are hard for leaders and institutions to identify. Anti-Jewish racism once focused solely on the religion of Jews, vilifying them for not accepting Christianity or for other aspects of their religious beliefs and traditions that made them different. Then it focused on the notion of race, demonizing Jews for being inferior to pure white Aryans. And depending on the source of hatred, it is focused on economic issues, accusing Jews of being capitalist or communists. It can connect to nationalism, first faulting Jews for being stateless and later discriminating against Jews for having their own state. There is no monopoly on anti-Semitism. It comes from the far right, the far left, Islamic extremist groups, even from our former council president. Sadly, it is one of the oldest and most enduring forms of hatred, and it is all around us. Because it comes in so many forms, it's important to have a clear understanding of what it is and call it out when people are engaging in it. Now, some people have expressed concerns that using this type of definition will somehow stifle free speech for people or reduce their ability to call out Israel for bad policies or criticize Israel. I heard a few speakers talk about it, saying that it's conflating anti-Semitism with being anti-Israel. I want to make it clear. Nothing in this resolution should be construed as or intends to limit anyone's right to freedom or expression of political debate, and that criticizing Israel or Israeli policies is in no way, in and of itself, anti-Semitic. I have criticized Israeli policies. Everyone should feel free to criticize Israel. The definition will not change that. However, applying double standards of Israel because it is a Jewish state can certainly be anti-Semitic. Holding Israel to a higher standard on issues because it's a close ally of the U.S. is one thing, and that would not be in and of itself anti-Semitic. Whereas singling out Israel because Israel is a Jewish state and applying tropes and stereotypes that have been used against the Jewish people to the Jewish state would certainly be anti-Semitic. To me, this distinction is clear. Regardless, the actual definition that we are adopting today does not get into these kind of details. But I thought I should address it because I know it is a very sensitive issue for many people and invariably becomes part of the discussion. Today, we are adopting a definition that is not legally binding, but that is extremely useful in recognizing and calling out anti-Semitism when it rears its ugly head, inevitably. Today, we're sending a message to the Jewish community that anti-Semitism is one of the forms of hatred that we will not tolerate. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. President, for scheduling this item today. And I thank Mr. Blumenfield for seconding this resolution and for always partnering with me on efforts to protect our city's Jewish community. And I also want to thank the advocacy groups, ICANN, Stand With Us, the Jewish Federation, ADL, and many, many others, both Jewish and non-Jewish alike, who have stood up to speak in solidarity and against hate. Colleagues, in April 2022, the Anti-Defamation League's Anti-Semitic Incident Audit noted a startling rise in anti-Semitic hate incidents and crimes in Los Angeles. Anti-Semitic incidents rose 217% from 2017 to 2021, and California and the U.S. reached all-time highs. But as was noted, the color of anti-Semitism has changed. It's not always overt, and it certainly doesn't look like the anti-Semitism that my father experienced in Nazi Germany or after he fled the Nazis in late 1939 and came to Los Angeles. My parents told me of signs in store windows that said, "No dogs or Jews allowed." But I didn't see anti-Semitism to any significant degree growing up in Los Angeles. I have seen it in recent years, though, both here and around the country and around the world. On July 1st, 2021 in Boston, Rabbi Shlomo Nijinsky was stabbed 8 times outside a Jewish school by an individual with a documented history of anti-Semitism. In our very own city, in my district, in my neighborhood, in May of 2021, a group waving the Palestinian flag confronted diners in a restaurant. They asked who was Jewish before viciously assaulting a Jewish man and the man who came to his defense who was not Jewish, who I had the privilege of finally meeting today when he came to speak. And recently, of course, the most visible, the anti-Semitic banners draped over the 405 with individuals giving Nazi salutes. That same weekend, residents of Beverly Hills, Westwood, Bel Air, Mid-City, and other neighborhoods woke to anti-Semitic flyers stuffed in envelopes with sand and placed on their lawns. But there are also many more veiled examples of anti-Semitism. Just one at Tufts University on February 2021, Max Price, a member of the Tufts Community Student Union Judiciary, was threatened with impeachment because he identified with his Jewish heritage and connection to Israel. There are examples that could go on and on and on, in person and online, from coast to coast and across the world. There are unprovoked attacks on Jews and Jewish institutions. And it certainly wonders what my father must have been speaking in the 1920s growing up in Germany as anti-Semitism just began to raise its ugly head. And I wonder how much different it was than what we're seeing today. And that's why we're here today. As the noted historian Raul Hilberg noted, the Nazis didn't call themselves anti-Semites. And those who engage in modern forms of anti-Semitism are no different. Perpetrators target Jews for supporting Israel's existence and yet claim that their intent was anti-Israel, not anti-Jewish. And organizations that oppose Israel's existence have pushed their own definition of anti-Semitism. Our society generally accepts that each community gets to define its own definitions of anti-Semitism. And our society generally accepts that each community gets to define its own oppression. One gender doesn't get to tell the other what is sexist. And as the city of Los Angeles and the world overheard on the notorious tapes that were leaked a few weeks ago, the white or Latino communities, or anyone else for that matter, don't get to tell the black community what racism is to them and what should be regarded as offensive or threatening. One group really doesn't have the authority to determine what behaviors are racist towards another group. In my belief, Jews have the right to define and identify how they experience anti-Semitism, especially in environments where anti-Semitic incidents are often dismissed. So colleagues, what is before you is a resolution seeking to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which reads as follows. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. It also requests that city departments, staff, elected and appointed officials and contract agencies familiarize themselves with the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, associated reference materials, examples and articles that incorporate their use where appropriate. Now this is a pretty broadly consensus of a definition. Whoops. It also has been adopted by the U.S. State Department website, which has displayed it since 2010. It's been used by the Departments of Education, Justice, and State. It's been adopted by governments of over 30 countries. It's been signed on to by 35 governments that are members of the IHRA. It's been used by the justice ministries of Austria and Germany. It's been adopted by the European Union. It's been adopted by the Global Imams Council, and it's been supported by both Republican and Democratic presidential administrations. It's a guiding tool for how to apply existing rules and laws where anti-Semitism may be involved. And in a world where anti-Semitism is on a dramatic rise, where violence against Jews is both underreported and under-prosecuted, and also terribly misunderstood, this will provide clarification to city departments, staff, elected officials, and contractors on how to identify anti-Semitism. This definition is the international consensus of anti-Semitism, developed by those who appreciate and understand the phenomenon from experience. And there's nothing else that provides this type of clarity. It will not diminish free speech. It will not diminish criticism of Israel. And just as Mr. Blumenfield has noted, many of us have been critical of Israel. This would not stop us from criticizing them when we feel it's appropriate. So I ask you for your consideration, and it would mean a lot to me if you were able to find it in all of your hearts to give this an aye vote.
Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Koretz and Mr. Blumenfield, for your leadership on this important issue. I also want to thank and acknowledge all the Angelenos who have advocated for this particular item. Thanks to those of you who have joined us in person today and stuck this out all day long. Anti-Semitism is a poison that has existed for millennia. Throughout every age, including this one, people have expressed hatred toward Jews in rhetorical and physical forms, including acts of violence that we must never forget. The rise in anti-Semitism locally and globally is more than just alarming. The events of the past week occurred just as we observed the 4-year anniversary of the devastating massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the deadliest act of anti-Semitism in our nation's history. I know that the Jewish community here in Los Angeles, across the country and across the globe, is strong and resilient. As a member of the Native American and LGBTQ community myself, I stand with you in solidarity today and always. With today's vote, we affirm not only that there is no place for anti-Semitism in Los Angeles, but this city government will be active in combating it in whatever form it takes. So colleagues, let's be strong and loud and relentless in the fight against anti-Semitism, hate, and discrimination in all of its forms. I join my colleagues, Mr. Koretz and Mr. Blumenfield, in asking for an aye vote for this resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, members. We've certainly heard a great deal of input on this. Thank you for your comments, members. As Mr. Koretz and Mr. Blumenfield have both pointed out, what's before us is language of a definition that is that I haven't heard anyone object to yet. It's language that focuses on hatred directed towards Jews and Jewish institutions in the community. And at a time when the city is still reeling from divisions and working so hard to try to come back together and support one another and to heal those divisions, I think it's particularly appropriate that we take this step forward today. I know there has been some suggestion that some of the examples that are listed in the IHRA materials and websites and so forth are of concern to some people, but as Mr. Blumenfield pointed out, that is not what's before us today. What's before us today is the definition that's stated in the resolution. And if departments and contractors and the others, appointed officials and contract agencies, familiarize themselves with the entirety of the IHR definitions and examples, they will be able to incorporate those where appropriate or choose not to where appropriate. So it's a pretty straightforward matter that's before us today, members, and that is the definition as it's contained in the resolution. So if there's no other members wishing to speak, let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the votes.
11 ayes.